I am continuing the brushwork process. I just slightly sped up the video. It is sped up by 2 times throughout this video. I just didn't want to bore you out before our main dish is even served. So all of our colors are in the right places already. Let's move on to fine details and some final adjustments. We will frequently use texture brushes. I kinda like these two texture brushes most, the blocky chalky and the big grunge. By just changing size and opacity, I can use them for many purposes such as line art, adding texture in details. I am adding some strong texture works on this spot, just like our reference. Let's add those lines. I tend to do such line arts at the very last stage when I feel like I won't need any further detailing on a spot. I like to move into adding line arts. I sampled the turquoise color to draw these straight crevices. I think these lines are mostly signifying some crevices on the rocks. I could add more mossy details here. When adding grainy textured details like this, I like to almost tap with my stylus with varying pressure instead of making a stroke. I switched to my chalky brush so that I can get those bigger patch-like details. Switch to our custom brushes that we made in our last lesson. It can help me to blend that patchy area with the lower area. So as you already noticed, I would often zoom out to see where I need to shift my attention next, and again I would zoom in to see my reference clearly. Actually, these things only matter when I try to recreate an illustration as closely as possible, but you can totally skip truthfulness. I am afraid I have developed some sort of OCD that keeps me bugging and saying that, hey Tausif, that part of your 3D mesh didn't match up with the reference. But like I said, you could care less about this amount of fidelity while recreating a painting in 3D. It is actually okay as long as your 3D renditions looks like a painting or 2D illustrations. That is my main goal here. You don't have to give it your all to match the reference so hard. But I agree, I subconsciously do that because it is a habit I developed from my professional works. You know, I often come across jobs where my responsibility is to remake a 2D background concept from all angles in 3D. It is actually cost friendly for animation studios. So my OCD does come in handy in such situations. As you can see, being able to recreate a painting with high fidelity is not an useless trait either. It can help you to get more jobs. I am just forbidding you to get lost in such details right away when you are beginning and learning the basics. Developing observational skills can take some time, so it is okay to be relaxed for now and just try to enjoy the process of painting in 3D space. I used the rake brush to rake out that place just like the reference. Rune-like markings next. These kind of markings are pushing the illustrative look of the artwork. They are almost like quick scribbles that lets our eyes to rest over there for a while. I choose the blocky chalky so that I can get a more uniform and opaque line art like the reference. As you can see, those lines on our reference don't have much visual effect, so it makes the blocky brush a good choice. I want to paint some denser moss in those intersection of two rocks. Maybe I should randomize the chalky brush even further. Yeah, much better. I will paint some cracks here too. This is the fun of painting details on low poly unlit models. We can create illusion of details through painting rather than adding real details to the meshes. So our super simple geometry will hold all the details we need. Up next, I will paint those light green liners. I'm still using the same chalky brush. Maybe you already noticed that I am not working with lots of texture brushes. In fact, there is no need to go overboard with texture brushes. Just 2 or 3 custom texture brush can carry most of the detailed texturing. It is because custom brushes are highly customizable. I find it more convenient to reuse a custom brush for several purposes by making slight adjustments in brush setting quickly. I don't have the patience nor the time to browse through tons of custom brushes. So you will often see me how I use the same texture brush for adding details sometimes, or some other times I would just decrease the brush radius and make Bristled color pencil brush out of it so that I can make some quick line arts. Still, I will supply some common brushes that can help you with most of the texturing process. I'm using this soft and hard edge brush to draw those line arts. Maybe I mentioned it before that you can use this brush to get soft edges or hard edges depending on the direction of your brush stroke. I am trying to mimic this line art that looks sharp at one side and softer on the other side. The pressure sensitivity of my graphics tablet is helping me a lot in this process. I can easily sample out lighter colors because that caused from lower opacity which resulted from my low pressure in graphics tablet. I sampled the green from this neighboring rock. It will help me to get rid of this super sharp digital looking line. I zoomed out again. Before moving into details, it is better to work on your holes as much as possible while zooming out. I would like to remove some details from here because it will give a better sense of depth to our rock. So we should put details mostly on the front areas where our eyes will naturally rest upon when we first look at our subject. Moving on to the next rock, it is pretty much ready to receive some line arts as well. The rest of the process is mostly about refining. I think this is as far as I will go for this project from this view angle since it is only to get you into painting. After painting those unseen part from reference, I will conclude this. I also put another rock in the unseen part. It kinda looks balanced that way. I already filled the rock with some dark green color with our fill tool. I kinda feel like changing my viewport color to the background of the reference. This color picker used to work before for this purpose. Something is wrong with this latest version of Blender. Anyway, I can always copy paste the hex code. I just noticed that I missed that line on top. Something like this will do. To keep the line smooth, I try to draw it very fast. Yes, it looks pretty good now. Also, let's assign a material for our hand-painted rocks. We need to eliminate all 3D lightings from our scene. But let's take care of this special thing first. When I switch to rendered view, everything looks very washed away, which is very undesired in my workflow. It is actually caused by Filmic View Transform. Filmic is so good that it replaced the default standard mode. Yeah, I will just stick to a standard. So just adding an emission shader is enough for now. Actually, I see a slight change when I switch to render view. This is strange because it should look exactly the same since my viewport shading is flat by default. Let's try with a shadeless shader. You can bring the shadeless shader by importing an images plane. Just check the shadeless in material setting. So this is the shadeless shader. I just copied it with Ctrl+C and pasted it here. But the result is still the same. Okay, I figured it out after observing it from very close. It is probably the cavity of viewport overlay. So that is how you debug something by not giving up. So you can either use the emission or the shadeless shader, or you can even directly plug in the texture to material output. But I won't recommend that at all. Don't limit yourself like that. There is many things we can try if we use emission or default shadeless shader. I continued painting on the unseen part. I painted a more deep turquoise color on that side. Just sampled it out from the reference. I am matching those edges. It is removing the digitalized straight line at the same time. Painting unseen part of your reference can be pretty refreshing. My advice for this part is that you should save this for the very last step because working on the parts you can see in reference will build up some sort of useful memories regarding the style of texturing details or even about the behavior of brush marks or brush working. You will be able to make quick decisions about picking the appropriate color. I am also very tempted to throw some red patches over here since they are a prominent part of our reference. I just fixed up my brush. So the overall color of this side should be darker in my reasoning. I moved on to the middle rock by selecting it. I want to make this side darker. Actually, in my calculation, the right side is not directly receiving any light, so that will be heavily shadowed. I darkened those places around intersections as well. Maybe in my final renders it don't even show, but that is something I will decide later. Trying to give some form to this rock by making divisions of values, lighter values on top as usual. I also put shovel highlights in edges and some ambient occlusion in the intersections again. I will darken the right side of the big rock too, but this will be less dark than the previous one because I think its local color is lighter in comparison to the other two. Let's add some dark color variation to make this side look more interesting. I am pretty much done with throwing darker values on this side. Let's blend those sharp edges too. I picked a darker value to continue this curved line from the top all the way to the dark side. I actually had very few things to do on the right side because it is in the shadow and so it won't need a very detailed texturing job. I should do that green line art in the left side as well. I can actually try something interesting for this. Let's change the blend mode for our brush. After going through several options, I feel like overlay is the answer. So it will give me a lighter color when interacting with these lighter values at front and will be darker when my line interacts with dark greens. Yes, overlay was the answer all along. Hit Shift plus S to turn stabilization mode on. I need some fine control in this step. That will do. I think I am done painting most of the characteristics of the reference. As you can see, I didn't even try very hard to perfectly nail every characteristics to the very fine details. Just this subtle implication of some of the prominent features of the reference art in our texturing already made our 3D version very close to the original. I continued that line to the side with a darker tone like before. It is of lighter value with respect to the rock surface, just like the part which is lit directly. Maybe I can try to blend in some dark turquoise on this rock. it doesn't actually look very good. I will retrace my steps with Ctrl plus Z. If you run out of undo moves, then you can just repaint it back to the previous color like this. Instead, I will draw some patches which can signify some higher density of moss. I took the big glance brush, by the way. This edge corner could use some more attentions. And those directional lines could receive more saturated colors. I am drawing some lines with a red hue on the side too. Also, we can add those rune-like scribbles on the side too. It will make the rocks coherent if we think about the overall design. As you can see, I am still using the big grunge brush with a smaller radius to draw line art. Like I said before, it gives a nice textured look on line art. I quite like it. So that was all for this part. I hope you have picked up most of my useful techniques and habits for texturing and brushworking in Blender. You can follow my example of being lazy and quick, or you can also stay organized by sticking to the brush presets that comes with this course. Up next, I will make a very simple camera animation to showcase the models from both sides. We can parent every rocks to an empty with Ctrl plus P. By the way, my camera is locked to view. So from camera view, I can easily set up composition just by moving around my mouse. Feel free to change output resolution or aspect ratio with respect to our subject matter. Also, since this subject is something isolated, I am going to treat it as if I'm looking it from very up close. In such situations, I like to keep the focal length of camera very large so that the perspective gets very toned down. Well, if something is very close to us, it will be harder to detect the deformation effect from perspective easily. Hence, I decided to use larger focal length. I think I could refine those scribbles just a little bit more. The animation is very simple, just some rotational keyframes. I copied the first keyframe to the last frame so that I can make a perfect loop. Somewhere in between them, we can add another keyframe with different rotation. I felt like that was very slow, so I scaled the animation for 180 frames instead by dragging the keyframes. Now this looks much better. I am previewing how the animation went. Well, it doesn't look okay at all. Note how the subject reached the edge of our frame as if it is trying to leave it. It happened because the mean center of those rocks is aligned with the empty parent, but it can be easily fixed by keyframing, lens shift, Nothing gets changed for initial position and the last frame. Then I moved on to the middle keyframe, which was in frame 90 for our empty parent, to adjust my lens shift and keyframed the change. Actually it worked pretty well. That will do. I am quite satisfied with what I got. Up next, I will render the animation. I can render out the animation directly to a MP4 file this way. It will be saved to the TMP folder. So that was it for this lesson. See you in the next one.